value system, because if you don't provide them with a value system at home, they're going to find it somewhere else, and it may not be a good value system. You combine that with the fact that when they go to school, in many cases, they're surrounded by a bunch of politically correct people who begin to indoctrinate them in something other than the can-do attitude, and we got a problem.
Dr. Siegel?
You know, Dr. Carson, I'm not surprised that a doctor like you, who's a top pediatric neurosurgeon, who literally has the brains of children in his hands, personal responsibility would be your first and foremost idea. And taking that theme further, I wonder, you started talking about health savings accounts and skin in the game. How do you feel about this idea that if patients knew what they were buying, knew what they were getting, how much a CAT scan cost, how much an MRI cost? Instead, we have a system where all of this feeds together with physicians who are afraid of malpractice, afraid of being sued. So many tests are ordered unnecessarily. Yes. On the patient side, they don't know what they're getting. On the doctor side, they're afraid of not ordering it. What do you have to say about that?
Well, first of all, I would say that you look at all the countries in the world, we're the ones who have the big problem with malpractice. So what is it that's here that isn't everywhere else? The Trial Lawyers Association. Okay, special interest groups. Anything in our society almost that comes out of Washington that doesn't make sense is attached to a special interest group. They've become, as I alluded to in the speech, the fourth branch of government. Until we deal with that, we're going to keep doing things that don't make sense.
Deneen?
Well, Dr. Carson, I want to thank you for your leadership. But you do know that the black liberal establishment is not going to be happy with you. And I'm talking about the community activists, some of the pastors, some of the politicians and the black media, because it's your story of success that they don't want communicated to the black community, because they thrive on talking about blacks are victims and need special treatment. So I want to thank you for all you do and for your leadership, because we need more leaders such as yourself to communicate the story that America really is an exceptional country.
Absolutely, thank you. And I've heard from a lot of black leaders, actually, since this time, who are very thrilled with what I'm saying. I'm sure there are some that are not, but people are starting to think for themselves, and this is what I really enjoy. Black people, white people, brown people, yellow people, think for yourself. Don't be a puppet.
Celia?
So the Government Accountability Office came out with their year-end fiscal report back in January, and they said that we need to start running surpluses of 1% over the next century just to keep the same debt to GDP ratio we have today. Right. The Senate can't even budget or process a budget in the Senate right now. How do we shift the narrative to start talking about surpluses?
Well, you know, I think we would get surpluses almost immediately if we changed our policies. If we took away a lot of the burdensome regulations, if we dropped the tax rates, you would see money flooding back into this place if we just gave people the kinds of incentives that they used to have. And you look what happened in this country when we didn't have an oppressive government and when we did encourage entrepreneurship. We just skyrocketed. It's all pent up right now, ready to go. Look at all the money that's on Wall Street. That money would be invested immediately if people felt that there wasn't some nefarious government out there trying to figure out how to get their money.
Yeah, and by the way, the money wouldn't be in the Caymans, which you mentioned in your speech. And also if we would drill.
Yes.
Drilling, natural gas, whether Saudi Arabia.
I mean, you look at North and South Dakota, Montana, you look at all that shale up there.
Oh, it's crazy.
I mean, we could just blow Saudi Arabia off the map economically.
Yeah, I love not being PC. Jeff Lord.
Doctor, I'm taking care of my 93-year-old mom, and so we have a few doctors in our life. And one of them left his practice not long ago for something called, I'm learning, called a concierge practice. Another is very concerned about his practice and its continuance and his role in his own practice. Can you talk a little bit about how this Obamacare is affecting doctors in the medical community?
Yes. Well, first of all, recognize that you have to go back and look at this historically. When Medicare, Medicaid first came along, you know, doctors who took care of those patients knew that they weren't going to make any money, but they were okay with it because the insurance companies at that time did have to pay for the ones who did have insurance. And just about every doctor, Dr. Siegel can tell you, had a percentage of their practice that was indigent, and they didn't care. We've always taken care of those patients. But now, because the margins are so narrow, because the insurance companies can do what they want to do, they're not capable of doing that anymore. And, you know, I do think we need some insurance reform also, because when you stop and you think about it, one of the major pillars of our medical system are insurance companies that make money by denying people care. We need to deal with that situation because that's an inherent conflict of interest. And I'm sure if we sit down and put our heads to it, we can figure out a way that they can make an adequate profit and people can still be taken care of. But remember, when we go to the HSA situation, the insurance companies will have a very different role because they will just be doing bridge insurance, and we also will have a way of taking care of catastrophic insurance.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back more with our studio audience and Dr. Carson on the special edition of Hannity. And welcome back to the special audience edition of Hannity, and Dr. Ben Carson is with us, and we're taking questions. Our good friend Sandra Smith of the Fox Business Network.
Lightning
Thanks,
round?
Sean. Dr. Carson.
Yeah, this will be the lightning round because we don't have a lot of time.
Sure, and I think that one of the biggest questions after listening to you tonight, it's been an absolute pleasure, is have we gone too far? Do you think that America can come back from where we are today?
Great question.
I do think that. That's why I wrote the book, because I think we have what it takes to do it. We're just going to have to speak up. That's the key.
Jamie?
It's January 2017. You've just been inaugurated President of the United States. What would be your top legislative priorities?
Well, assuming that things are continuing the way they are now, we got to get the economy working again because that will take care of the jobs. Productivity rather than just mindless jobs.
All right, Leslie.
Doctor, when you say things people don't want to hear, usually there's an immediate effort to delegitimize the speaker. Were you concerned about that before you made that speech in that forum with that audience?
I wasn't concerned because there's nothing that they can do to delegitimize me. There's no skeleton that they can find. They're going to try. Good luck.
Yeah. You actually said in one of your speeches, live a clean life. You don't have to worry, and don't lie because you don't have to worry about what you said 3 months ago. I read that.
He's good.
Kerry.
Doctor, in the 1960s, you had Ronald Reagan speaking out against socialized medicine for the AMA. The AMA made a complete 180 and was speaking out for Obamacare. What happened?
Well, first of all, only 23% of doctors belong to the AMA. And they go and they grab those ones and they say, this represents the AMA. Enough said.
Betsy?
I'd like to know how you would solve this problem as a doctor and also as President of the United States. Section 1311 of this law empowers the federal government.
Law.
The Obama health law empowers the federal government for the first time in history to dictate how doctors treat privately insured patients, even if you bought a plan like an Aetna plan or a Cigna plan and paid for it yourself. How will you protect that doctor-patient relationship?
Probably by rewriting that law.
Good answer.
Doctor, thank you so much for speaking your mind. I certainly hope you keep it up in the future. But who in the current debate reflects your values and views the most effectively of anybody in politics or public life?
Well, I certainly enjoyed what Senator Rubio had to say last night. And I'm sure there are many up-and-coming young people, Bobby Jindal, and we'll just have to keep looking and hoping that people are courageous and forward-thinking.
Heather?
Does a message of personal responsibility sell politically anymore? We've seen President Obama suggesting universal pre-kindergarten care, basically telling parents that it's not their responsibility to prepare their children for school, but rather the government's. I don't think your mother would have bought that message. She understood that it was for you to do that, but we seem to be expanding things that the government can do instead of individuals.
Yes.
Can a politician stand up and say, sorry, we're not going to give you any more programs. It's for you to take care of your lives?
I think it can sell, but we have to start talking about it. You see, the politically correct police have silenced the debate. We have to create the debate again, and a lot of the people who are in the middle will have an aha moment.
Stefano.
The speech with the part about your mother touched me so deeply as a mother of young boys, and I'm wondering how can we best limit the government in a way that creates a million Mrs. Carsons raising up her sons and herself out of poverty into prosperity? How do we do that?
We become smart voters. And you know, a lot of people, they go into the voting booth, they say, oh, there's a name I recognize. Yeah, I'm voting for that one. That's about all they know. I mean, if you don't know more than that, you probably should just not vote, or you need to go and teach yourself, because you could be voting against your self-interest.
Yeah, Dr. Siegel,
Carson, do you think the president heard you? I was hoping that with everything that had happened, that he'd come up to you afterwards and say, I heard you. Do you think he heard you?
I'm praying that he did. If he did, you should see some changes in his actions.
Avik?
You would, you know, you're based in Baltimore, and you touched on Medicaid earlier, and as you know, the health outcomes of patients on Medicaid are a lot poorer than they are for private insurance because it underpays docs and underpays hospitals. But this is the big debate in states around the country, is whether they should expand their Medicaid programs as Obamacare requires them to do. If you were advising the governor of Maryland, what would you tell him to do with the Medicaid expansion?
Well, I would say we need to start talking about something that makes sense. You know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to invest a lot of our eggs in something that doesn't work.
Jedediah, real quick.
Yeah, I'm a former teacher and dean, and I just want to know, how do we get young people to care about the debt and deficit?
I think we have to give them examples, like the one that I gave, 507,000 years, so they begin to understand what they're facing.
I'm sorry, we missed 3 people. Go ahead, Mary, quick.
I was just going to say, it's easier to be ignorant and reliant than it is to be responsible and informed. How do you change that?
Well, one of the things we're going to have to do, and I don't have a lot of time to get into it, but we have to use technology. There are some wonderful ways that we can use that. Virtual classrooms that can help us enormously. I'm working on that project with something in Baltimore right now.
And you have your scholarship fund, and it's on
Absolutely.
the web at
carsonscholars.org.
All right.
Everybody get involved.
All right. Dr. Carson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great honor to have you.
Absolutely.
And that is all the time we have left. As always, thank you for being with us. Let not your heart be troubled. The news continues. We'll see you back here Monday night.